Well, I didn't get a chance to do my little interview introduction when we were on the Camino together. So we're doing it now. This is my friend David Wen, who's in his loft in Amsterdam. David and I met on the Camino de Santiago this past September. I'm going to let you tell your story, David, but I want to talk today a little bit about the power of connection and our friendship, our continued friendship post Camino is a testimony to the power of connection. But tell people that are watching this a little bit about you and how you ended up in Amsterdam.
Yeah, well, thanks a lot, Kirk. That's a long story, so I'll try to keep it short. So where does it start? Well, I'm originally born and raised in San Francisco, California. I was born in a multicultural family and in a very traditional Chinese family, and so, but also in a very liberal city of San Francisco. So growing up was a bit of a challenge, but a fun challenge. But I loved growing up in San Francisco. I grew up in Chinatown, and I remember like walking out in the streets with people selling fresh fruits, fresh fish, etc. Eventually went to school in LA and did my bachelor's at UCLA where I studied economics. And, throughout my life, I think a big theme has been education, 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 because I come from a very traditional Chinese family. And so after college, I got a job in consulting. And so I was kind of climbing up and following that path and worked in consulting. Always had a dream of working in the media industry. So I found a job at Universal Studios. So I worked in Hollywood in you could say a finance team. And that was really fun, really exciting. But I think I was around 25, 26, and was kind of at that stage in my life where I was questioning a few things in my life, where I wanted to go. And so due to a few circumstances at work and also a few questions in my life, I decided to make a leap and go to Zimbabwe. So I quit my job. I bought a one-way ticket to Zimbabwe to volunteer for a nonprofit. That ended up being a year and a half of traveling, working with nonprofits, teaching in schools, and just opening up my mind to the world. And that was a life-changing moment, I think, when I look back in my life, where my perspective changed. When I came back, I had a culture shock coming back to San Francisco. And
Hmm.
so
It's
that,
funny you say that, David. It's funny you say that, and I want you to expand on this a little bit because people from the States look at San Francisco as a melting pot, and it kind of is for the United States. And you're talking about you left and came back and realized how different life, even in a melting pot like San Francisco, you came back changed by the experience because you went out beyond the borders of the United States, beyond the borders of California, and went to a completely different cultures and came back affected by that. Tell me a little bit more about that.
I mean, similar to the Camino, that year abroad, especially spending my time in more of these developing countries, really changed my perspective because, again, I think if I look back on my life so far, I'd been in San Francisco, world of tech, LA, world of Hollywood, and just being surrounded by just a lot of things, material things, status, fame. And I was sucked into that world as well. And so when I left, I realized for me, that wasn't that important. Similar to the Camino, I had a backpack and a few pairs of underwear, a few t-shirts, and I became a minimalist and it was completely fine. I survived. I actually really enjoyed it. And it was really the connection, people I met along the way that really made life fulfilling. And so when I came back and I came back to this, I guess, excess, a lot of material stuff around me, it just didn't appeal to me anymore because before I felt like, I was stuck in this rat race, right? And I think it's a mindset thing. And when I came back, I wasn't so excited at moving up the corporate ladder. That wasn't as appealing to me anymore. Not to say I wasn't ambitious, but I guess my priorities changed and
The game changed.
the game changed. And coming back to San Francisco, the reason why I said it was a culture shock was because I guess I came back and saw the disparity in the people who have something and the people who don't.
Mm.
There's a lot of There's a big homelessness problem in San Francisco. It's very evident. And also, not as, I'd spent a year traveling around the world. When I came back, San Francisco is still a melting pot. It's still very culturally diverse, but it's changed so much because of technology and people coming there specifically to work in tech, which is awesome. But besides tech, it's also driven out a lot of the art scene and the
Ah.
diversity that San Francisco is known for. It's still diverse, but it was more just tech focused. And so eventually that was what brought me to think about where else could I potentially go. I love San Francisco. I still think it's the most beautiful city in the world. But it just made me think about options in life. Where else could I go? Where else did I want to go? And I've always wanted to come back to Europe. I spent a summer studying in Spain and really enjoyed European culture, whatever that meant. I guess I was just intrigued by the people that I met and how the lifestyle here is quite different from the US. And so I wanted to explore that a bit more. So I found a master's program that I wanted to do in the Netherlands. It was a 1-year program. If I didn't enjoy it, I could always come back. And so I applied to a master's program in a small town called Maastricht. It's in the south of the Netherlands. And I was there for about a year studying. And when I finished, I thought about what the next steps were. I wasn't ready to leave yet. And gratefully, I found a job in Amsterdam. And so I had a few months gap between my start date. And I always knew I wanted to do the Camino de Santiago because I heard about it 10 years ago when I was in Spain. And I wanted to do it because of the adventure, also because there was a big change in my life, moving to a new country where I didn't really know anyone, building a new community again. And also, I guess something that I shared with you on the Camino was, as soon as I moved to the Netherlands, I found out one of my best friends passed away. And at the time, I didn't know how to deal with it, what to think. And so going on the Camino was something I knew I needed to do, not just for adventure, not just for thinking about change in my life, but also for grieving as well. And so that's what eventually brought me to the Camino, and that's where I met you and connected with so many great people and really taught me some lessons about life.
It's really amazing. You have this story, and your story is unique to you, and your cultural background, your family relations, your time in San Francisco, and all the stuff you've done traveling to Zimbabwe and then in Europe. And by happenstance or good fortune, we end up on the Camino at the same time. And I think we met on like day 3-ish of the Camino. And like a couple other people, we just developed this connection, and we started talking about life in meaningful ways. Connection is one of my big words. It's one of the most important things to me in my life. And you brought your story, I brought my story. We start walking on dirt roads in Spain and start sharing stuff that really matters. You talked with emotion about the experience of losing someone very important to you, very close to you, and I shared part of my story, and we found ourselves connecting at a deeper level on the Camino. And it happened, I think, because there was a willingness to be vulnerable. There was a willingness. You've identified stuff in yourself that made you want to go walk the Camino for the adventure, all the things you rattled off. You talked about adventure. You talked about, reorganizing your life, and then you talked about grieving. And I think everybody comes there with different reasons and different purposes. But I found it so fascinating and so beautiful that you could walk with a complete stranger. And now that complete stranger is my dear friend. And we had this 34-day experience on the Camino that was beyond anything I could have imagined. Talk a little bit about what your expectations were as you kind of took out from Saint Jean Pied de Port and started walking up the hill.
Yeah, I think you hit it on the nail, the connection piece. And so my expectations, and I think we talked about this, was I had watched a few YouTube videos, read a few books, but I didn't really know what to expect for myself. So I really had the expectation of just walking and having a lot of time to myself to think, to do some more thinking, maybe shed a few pounds or two. And the whole connection piece was a pleasant surprise. I knew I would be meeting a lot of people, but I had no idea to what level, to what extent. And so, yeah, we talked about this. What was beautiful about the Camino was the first day. I remember arriving at St. John Pied de Port, and it was sort of awkward. You'll see people, and you might engage in small talk. And where are you from? And even the first day, going up the Pyrenees and going down to Roncesvalles, I really didn't talk to anyone. I think
It's really evident on the first day or two of the Camino who's done either the Camino or something like it before and who has not, right? You can tell that you're a newbie, and everyone else can tell too.
like I had heard about this like Buen Camino thing, people saying Buen Camino, but the first day you don't know when to say it, how to say it. And so I was literally just walking and sometimes with my earphones on. And then I realized just take them off. And it was just admiring the scene as well. It was a beautiful day, I remember. But it wasn't until I think the end of the first day where you start meeting people over a dinner table, over a glass of wine, where you really get to start feeling a bit more comfortable and sharing. And then by the second day, people seem a little bit more loosened up. I felt more loosened up, more relaxed, more willing and ready to engage in conversation. And so I think after day 2, day 3, the theme for me during the whole Camino was the connection part and the beauty of walking and talking with people from around the world and people being vulnerable, like you said, just opening up and sharing their stories, their life stories, some of their deepest secrets. And that was the most amazing part about the Camino for me. The fact that
Well, it's
you
funny. When I met you, I have to tell this story because it always fascinates me. Day 3, somewhere mid morning, stopping for the first coffee at this little cafe on the side of the way. And in walks this dude who's saying, "Hey, I don't remember who you were talking to, but you were reintroducing yourself to somebody you met at the albergue the night before, I think. And you said your name was whatever it was, and I'm David. And I watched you doing this with like 2 or 3 people, and I thought, okay, this guy's got it figured out. He's here to connect, so I'm going to just walk up and introduce myself. So I walked up and shook your hand and said hi and introduced myself and told you, I think at the time, that I thought it was really cool that you're uh, connecting with all these people. By that time, I had met Daniela, and so all of a sudden, the 3 of us ended up on the Camino at the same time in the same proximity, and we started walking together. And I'm always fascinated with how serendipity, or call it whatever you want, put us on the Camino at the same time. And now I can't imagine the Camino without some of the people I met there, and it has become defining of what the Camino is to me. That was just that first moment with David Wen on the Camino, and then after that, it was like I think we walked pretty much every day in close proximity for the rest of the Camino.
we pretty much did. And like you said, it's just I think I was just so amazed by how open-minded the Camino was. The people were as well. I think in everyday society, especially in big cities, you somehow forget to uh, you lose that human touch. It's easy to just walk by someone and not even say hello and just engage in maybe how's it going, what do you do. But I guess I really missed that deeper connection that I once had. But it seems like everyone nowadays, everyone's busy, right? And you don't have, or you don't find the time to really catch up with someone to really talk about what's meaningful, and you don't really break through the surface level. And so that's the one thing that amazed me about the Caminos, even in day 2, that you could just meet people and open up and share. It was something I realized was extremely important to me in my life. And And I'm glad we all continued walking and talking, and eventually, and I'm glad we're here doing the Zoom call a few
Well,
months after.
we talked a bit about the law of attraction, and I think the reason the Camino works is because the kind of people that are attracted to do the Camino in the first place are kind of those open people, those people who are looking for connection, or at least those people who are looking for connection with themselves. And I think the way it naturally works is that when we start to connect with ourselves at a deeper level, when we disconnect from the world we come from, where you said the rat race, I used to call it the hamster wheel, you disconnect from this preoccupation with whatever it is you do for a living, 8 hours a day, at least 5 days a week for most people, and you go to a place in an environment where you can really focus on just being, not doing, right? And you're around a whole bunch of other people doing the same thing, then all of a sudden you realize, okay, I'm connecting here. And because I'm connecting here, I'm craving connection here. I want to talk to people. I want to hear their story. I want to share my story. And that's exactly what we experienced, was that the people that were attracted to the Camino were the kind of people that were just really interesting, really beautiful to connect with. They were going through different challenges, different experiences from all over the world. But there was that common thing of shedding all the distraction of what normally defines me and doing this thing that is very abnormal for most people, especially from the States. Who has 6 weeks to take off work to go walk, right?
Mhm.
And as a result of doing that rather radical thing, you and I both have met numerous people that we remain in contact with.
Yeah, and I think going back to shedding this layer, being vulnerable, and you brought this up, being authenticity. And I think what's amazing is I felt that I could open up and be my authentic self without any repercussions. It was one of the safest environments I've ever been a part of, where strangers could meet and connect and form these relationships in a matter of one day, 2 days, a few hours even. And I think people just felt safe to share, to open up. Whereas in everyday life, you might not have that environment in the workplace with even friends and family members, but everyone was just so open-minded and willing to share and to listen on the Camino.
Even if there was a language barrier, it didn't present an obstacle to that connection, which I found absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, I was walking with a Brazilian couple um, the first few days, and they didn't speak English. I didn't speak Portuguese, and so we were communicating through a mix of English, Portuguese, and Spanish. And even though we couldn't communicate, we communicated with hand gestures, and somehow it worked. We ended up walking the first week together, and it was remarkable because we still felt that connection, even though we couldn't really communicate with words. But through a mix of words and hand gestures and just kindness, it somehow worked.
Sonia was one of those people for me from Mexico City, originally from Spain, but from Mexico City. She struggled with English, and I horribly struggled with my Spanish. But we had some really meaningful conversations because we took the time, and maybe we got deeper because as we were walking, we knew we had to be more intentional in what we said, and we also knew we had to be more intentional in how we asked clarifying questions, because maybe I didn't quite understand what she was trying to say because of the language difference. But we got there. And I remember having a conversation with Helga from Brazil as well, who only spoke Portuguese. Her English was very limited, as you recall. And one day on the Camino, I got a text from her, and she was like in the same room. And I said, "What are you doing?" And she said, translator makes a conversation easier by text. And I wanted to ask you about that thing we were talking about earlier. So then we had this exchange that lasted 15 minutes, probably the most meaningful exchange we had, because we had understanding. But we had to have effort in order to have understanding. And I think my time on the Camino gave me a chance to be understood, and it gave me a chance to understand a wide, diverse group of people from a lot of different backgrounds, because I was willing to put myself out there, and
Mm.
others were as well. And the languages seem to fade. All the things that normally separate us, that cause us to sort into our little groups, right? not necessarily for nefarious reasons, not for critical reasons or racist reasons or anything like that, but we sort ourselves into groups because it's comfortable and it's easy. I'm going to gravitate to the English speaking people because they speak English and that's easier. But when you wash that away, you realize you can still have connection and you can have it across a broad spectrum. And that's one of the reasons why the Camino was so meaningful to me.
Yeah, you bring up a great point about diversity. And the beautiful thing about the Camino is you meet people from around the world, right? From Brazil to Spain to the US, Canada, Mexico, all over
Germany.
Europe, everything. And sometimes you might not be able to communicate at the level that you want to, but you also find out that as people, we all go through the same stuff, the same problems, the same challenges, and similar stories as well. And I think that's the beautiful thing, that you learn from someone else, from what you would think would be, the halfway around the world in a culture that's very different from yours, but yet they are going through the same challenges that you are, or have gone through similar challenges. And it just makes us more human and more approachable. And that was the beauty of it as well.
I think because of all those things you just described, we chose on 2 occasions to kind of operate a little differently than the traditional Camino. As we approached the city of Lyon, we all agreed that wouldn't it be cool if we could find an Airbnb instead of staying in the hostels? We'll stay an extra night in Lyon, kind of a day of rest. And so we found an Airbnb and we stayed in that Airbnb. And then we went out grocery shopping during the day and we bought all this food. We had vegetarians, we had meat eaters, we had everything, right? And one of the most beautiful experiences of the Camino for me was watching everybody in this crowded kitchen preparing a common meal to be shared together and then piecing tables together. And everybody sat around that table. I think there were actually 11 of us at that time, because that's when Enrique showed up from Mexico City, Brenda's husband. And we sat there and shared a meal and went around the table talking about our experiences so far. That moment was where connection went to a whole nother level. We had that time at one of the albergues where Brenda led a yoga class for us out on the lawn on a nice warm evening. And then our last night together in Santiago, after we've achieved this amazing accomplishment of walking 500 miles, 790 some kilometers over 34 days. And we have this connection that built over that time through shared experience and through blisters and through shin splints and through taking tumbles in the blackberry bushes. And we do the same thing. We get to Santiago, we go out grocery shopping, we get an Airbnb, we go out grocery shopping, we buy groceries, and we have a family meal together at the end. Those moments were particularly beautiful. They were also cementing the experiences that had happened prior to that. Does that make sense? I mean, I think they were the cementing moments. It took everything, all those experiences of connection, and cemented them into a relationship now.
And that's the beautiful thing about it. All this was done in a matter of 30 days, 33 days. And time was also another big theme for me, how the importance of time, and how, sometimes you blink and it's been a year, it's been 2 years. But in those 33, 34 days, it seemed like time expanded. But yet you were doing the same thing every day, right? You wake up around 6 a.m., you dress, you start walking, you might grab a cafe con leche, walk a few hours, get another snack, another cafe con leche, get some lunch, walk another few hours, albergue, dinner, sleep, repeat. So you're doing the same thing every day, but yet it seemed like time expanded. And I think it's because of the connection piece. And
it's funny you say that, because time expanded and time went really slowly until that last 100 kilometers or so, when everyone knew, it's getting close to the end. And then all of a sudden time became very precious and very guarded, and it got really important. I remember vividly, as we got closer, there was almost this apprehension of, oh crap, I don't want this to end.
Yeah, I remember filming you all leading up to Santiago de Compostela. No one is very apprehensive, I think, if I were to choose a word for it. And it wasn't really so much excitement at the beginning, but it was more, crap, I don't want this to end. Or I don't know what this means once I get to the end.
Yes.
And so, but of course, once eventually we all met up again, it was quite happy. But yeah, I think it got to us during the last few days when we were reminded that we're almost there.
Yeah.
And
And then that night at the Airbnb in Santiago, or just outside of Santiago, you wait in line. I'm sharing that. I know you know this, but the people watching this might not know it. But once you get to Santiago, you wait in line. You go put your name in. You get a number, and they buzz you on your cell phone when your number's up, so you can go get your Compostela, which is that certificate right up there on the shelf. And your Compostela is basically the Catholic Church's recognition that your passport's filled and you walked the distance that you claim you walked. And so they give you the certificate that says that. And we're sitting there at our Airbnb. We had a great meal together. And I think it was Kim or Julia. I think it was one of the younger members of our group said something about hey, let's take our Compostelas and do it like high school yearbook day where everybody signs it. And that's exactly what we did. We sat there at breakfast the next morning and people went around and just signed the Compostela from our little family that we built on the Camino. And I remember you filming that, David, and you just caught great images of people writing their thoughts and their memories of why that particular person was so meaningful to them or important to them or why they enjoyed them so much on the Camino.
yeah, that was one of the most beautiful moments towards the end. And we were all quiet surrounded that dinner table, that breakfast table, and we were just writing notes to each other. And we all knew it was time to say goodbye, but
Yes.
cementing these moments in words. And yeah, it was a very
and maybe putting off just a little bit longer that saying goodbye, because it was just a few hours later where everybody got up, packed up their stuff, and some of the group headed off to Finisterre, some headed off to fly home, some stayed in Santiago for a few days. But in the writing of that, we knew we were buying just a few more moments of that connection and that time.
But yeah, it was sometimes we spend 4 years in high school and we cement these memories with these yearbooks, yet we spent 30 days, a month, and we were able to form these connections that are still alive to this day, well, a few months afterwards. And I guess
Well, and this conversation, lest anyone be confused, this isn't a sales pitch for the Camino. We're not commissioned salespeople for the Camino de Santiago. Although I would encourage anyone, if you have the capacity to do it, do it. This is a sales pitch for connection. This is a sales pitch for reaching outside of your comfort zone and being willing to make connection with people. How old are you? 32?
31.
31. Sorry, I didn't mean to put an extra year on you. They come on their own.
31
I'm 57. The likelihood that a 31-year-old and a 57-year-old walking the Camino would develop the connection that we developed, Daniela the same way. I think she's your exact same age, 31 or 32, from Germany, a whole different culture, a whole different world. The fact that we would do this with 8 or 9 or 10 other people and make such deep connection, I think some of you started calling me Papa or something like that because I was the old guy.
Yeah.
But I was so honored that nobody let age or circumstances or experience in life dictate the connection. The connection just happened. And that is what I would be longing to communicate to other people. I don't care whether it's the Camino or whatever you have a chance to do. If you have a chance to break out of your comfort zone and connect, that's what I would encourage people to do. And you're continuing that in your new life in Amsterdam now.
And that's something that I've kept close to my heart. I still think about those 30 days, 33 days, 34. And like, what did I learn and how can I incorporate those lessons into my life? Like, one, it's the connection piece. And especially for me, moving to a new country, a new city, Amsterdam, I don't know many people. I have to rebuild a life here. There's no rule book for that. But one thing I do know is that connection is important, that I want to cultivate these relationships. And so I've been trying to go out to meet people, whether it's a meetup group or a company event, but just knowing how important that is to me. instead of staying home, it's so easy nowadays to stay at home and watch Netflix, but it's all about getting out there and trying to meet people. And it's a process. It's a challenge, of course. It's a big challenge I have right now.
I
But
think culturally we're wired for kind of a myopic approach to life. We put our blinders on and this is what we do and this is our world. And I think the beautiful thing of the Camino is it helps you kind of just take those blinders off and expand your worldview dramatically. And although, as you just mentioned, even in Amsterdam, another melting pot, you could put the blinders back on and sit at home and watch Netflix and do your work during the day and come home at night and not connect. And that's probably not going to be what you're going to do or are doing. One of the things you did that was super cool that I would love everybody to see, and I'll post the link along with this little conversation when we're done, but the video you captured, both photographs and video footage from the Camino, this labor of love that it took you a while to sort through it and edit it down, but you put together this video with some music, about 15 minutes long, right? I think it's about 15 minutes long. And you so perfectly and beautifully captured, and I'm sure it was hours and hours of video footage and hours of editing, but you so perfectly captured the essence of the Camino and you shared that with us. And I'm going to let you tell your story about the why behind doing it. But I checked it this morning. There's been 110,000 views on YouTube of that video. It's extraordinary. And I think it's extraordinary because people are looking for something beyond the rat race. They're looking for something beyond the hamster wheel. And what you captured in that video was the essence of our Camino, your Camino, because it includes more than me, but I was a part of it. And my bald head is featured prominently on your video because we hung out together the whole time. But I think people are looking for something that you captured in that video. Talk a little bit about the creation of that and the labor of love that it was.
Yeah, well, I'm a photographer, and I love capturing pictures and moments, and I also wanted to take some video clips. I think at that time I didn't know what I was going to do with it, but I really wanted to capture not just pictures but moments of us together. And I took over 1,000 pictures, probably 1,000 video clips as well on my iPhone. And afterwards, when I came back, in the midst of moving and everything, I also knew I wanted to do something with it because it was such a special moment, the people that I met, and I wanted to put something together for us that we could share together, for many years to come, because we've now formed this relationship, this family. And so, yeah, every day after work, I would spend a few hours going through my video clips and think about like what to put together, how to put things together. So I looked up YouTube clips. I bought an app and eventually put something together, 15 minutes. And I really wanted to capture us, and I wanted to make a video that would show the story of us. Now, there's many beautiful moments, scenic moments of the Camino, but what I really wanted to show was the connection piece, the people that you meet, the experiences that you have together. And with people from around the world, that's what I wanted to capture for us, so that it would be a memory for us. And hopefully I did that. And it was really fun to put together.
There were anywhere between 9 and 12 of us together on that Camino at any given time. And by and large, we stayed in the same albergues together almost every night. And again, some people lagged behind or marched ahead a little bit. So maybe there was 8 or 9 one night, and maybe there was all 12 the next night. But there was that group is what's captured in that Camino video that you produced. And I hope people take the time to watch it. 110,000 other people have taken the time to watch it. You really hit something there, and I'm excited to share that. Of course, it does. It's a little narrow in that it's our group, and in particular, 3 or 4 of us hung out together quite a bit. So me, you, Daniela, I think Toby's on there a lot. There's a group of us that are there together quite often, but it'll give people a real flavor for what we experienced on our Camino. And kind of my mantra in life for the rest of my life is going to be connect, break down the walls that create barrier, get rid of those walls and connect with people, get out of your comfort zone, and get to know people. And it's a big, beautiful world out there with really different, interesting, fascinating people. And if there's one thing that can cure what ails us as a society, and I mean global society, it's that. Tear down those walls, go connect with people, realize that different isn't bad or better. It's just different, and connect with it and learn from it and grow as a result of it. And that's what you've brought into my life. That's what the friends I made on the Camino have brought into my life. And I'm so grateful for it. Any parting comments about the experience, or about where you're headed from here?
I think you've captured it right then and there. And I think if there were a few themes that I've learned from the Camino, it's really that the importance of connection and community, the simplicity of life. You don't need a whole lot to really enjoy it, but what's really important is people, connection, and connection on a deeper level as well. And to just walk, just continue walking,
Just walk.
just walk.
Trying to keep doing that more and more as I'm back home in the States.
Yeah.
Well, listen, David, I know it's getting late there. Thanks for taking the time to do this. And thank you in particular, my friend, for doing that video, because I get to watch that over and over and over again. I don't care who else has watched it. Those other 109,000 people, I get to watch it over and over again, and relive the incredible experience that was the Camino, the incredible connection that was the Camino. So thanks for doing that. This conversation will continue. I hope to see you in Lecce in June for Cultural Global Labs. We've got a little opportunity to share more of our story on the Camino, and I'm excited to see where you go from here.
I'm excited as well. Hope to see you soon in Italy.
Thanks, my friend.